واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Tonight we are reciting from the 7th juz, from ayah number 82 of Surah Ma'idah to the middle, or to ayah number 35 of Surah An'am, Surah number 6. Surah An'am we'll talk about more tomorrow, just because all of tomorrow will be spent with Surah An'am, or tomorrow night. But this is the conclusion of Surah Ma'idah. Do you remember the nickname that I mentioned to you about what the Sahaba called Surah Ma'idah? The nickname that they gave to Surah Ma'idah, do you remember? The Surah of Halal and Haram, exactly, right? So in this particular last part, we have more of the Halal and Haram of the rulings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions. For example, He mentions about the ruling of what happens if a person was to take an oath by Allah. You know, we say Wallahi. You know you say Wallahi. That becomes an oath. That becomes a yameen. And that is something that must be fulfilled. Now, casually if a person says it because it's their habit, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَا يُؤَخِذُكُمُ اللَّهُ بِاللَّغْوِ فِي أَيْمَانِكُمْ. But what you intend, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to hold you accountable for your oath. And then if a person is not able to fulfill their oath, there is a kafara, a penalty that they pay. Okay? So that is highlighted here. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala highlights the penalty, very subtly He says at the end, وَاحْفَظُوا أَيْمَانَكُمْ. Concludes the ayah by saying that even though the penalty is very straightforward, fasting 3 days, or feeding 10 people, or clothing 10 people, it's not that difficult. That doesn't mean that you make it a habit to break your oaths. Because when a person has that habit of breaking their oath, their word is meaningless. Their integrity is lost. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us that وَاحْفَظُوا أَيْمَانَكُمْ. This is the penalty, but that doesn't mean that you are always in the penalty. Unless you're from the leaf, eh? Also in this is the ruling of alcohol. إِنَّمَا الْخَمْرُ وَالْمَيْسِرُ وَالْأَنصَابُ وَالْأَزْلَامُ رِجْسٌ مِنْ عَمَلِ الشَّيْطَانِ فَاجْتَنِبُوهُ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ Ayah 90. That ayah that definitively banned alcohol and gambling. So that is here as well. Also are some of the rulings regarding when a person goes for Hajj and they are in a state of Ihram, Hajj or Umrah, and there are certain restrictions that apply to them. For example, hunting. Okay, has anybody gone to Hajj and Umrah? Or Hajj or Umrah? Very good, right? Did you go hunting? Of course you didn't, because now we get catered food. But back in the day, you had to hunt on the way. You had to hunt on the way of the trip to survive. So subhanAllah, this was a big deal for the Sahaba. It was a very big deal because it made their travel very difficult. So this was mentioned here as well. The surah, as I had mentioned, talked a lot about the interfaith relationships between the Muslims and the Christian community and the Jewish community. So here are last point, the two beautiful examples of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in interfaith relations. First, He speaks about the role of the Christians, not the crusading evangelical Christians, but the ones who are ذَلِكَ مِنْهُمْ قِسِّيسِينَ وَرُهْبَانَ, the monks and the scholars, the learned of the Christian and the pious of the Christians, what's called the zuhad, people who are aesthetics. Those people, Allah says, you will find them to be the closest to you in Islam. And He speaks about them again in Surah Hadid, in chapter 57, if I'm not mistaken. It's a very interesting thing that people of spirituality, because there are people of spirituality, they cut themselves off from the world, they cut themselves off of pleasures of the world. While there's something to be said about the incorrect aqidah, but the spirituality and the softness of the heart is still mentioned and still recognized by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ مِنْهُمْ قِسِّيسِينَ وَرُهْبَانًا وَأَنَّهُمْ لَا يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ. They don't have arrogance. So it's a very beautiful description. Again, I told you, the Quran criticizes when criticism is due, but praises when praise is due. And here is the praise for the Christian monks. Also is a beautiful historical account of when a few Christians came to meet the Prophet ﷺ and they asked him questions, and when the Prophet gave them the answers, they started crying. Why did they cry? Because that's the overwhelming response, emotional response when you recognize the truth. إذا سمعوا ما أنزل إلى الرسول ترى أعينهم تفيض من الدمع مما عرفوا من الحق. You see their eyes overflowing with tears because they recognize the truth. And immediately upon recognition of the truth, they accepted Islam. And very subtly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes how sincere and how dedicated these people were. He says that فَأَثَابَهُمُ اللَّهُ بِمَا قَالُوا جَنَّاتٍ. Because of what they said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewarded them with paradise. Usually you have to believe and do what? Do good deeds, right? إِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. But here, بِمَا قَالُوا, just by their mere word, they were granted paradise because of the sincerity, because of the intense devotion they had immediately upon recognizing the truth of the Prophet ﷺ. So this were a group of people that came from Najran to speak to the Prophet, and they left accepting Islam and very, very moved by that encounter. The last part of Surah Ma'idah is where the name Ma'idah comes from. أَنزِلْ عَلَيْنَا مَائِدَةً مِنَ السَّمَاءِ. This is Isa alayhi salam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the day of judgment that Allah is going to gather all the prophets, and He's going to say, فَيَقُولُ مَاذَا أُجِبْتُمْ. What was the response that you got? The prophets, even the prophets, are to be questioned on the day of judgment. It's a court. Think of it as a court. And now the turn of the prophets is first. They stand trial first before their followers. وَإِذَا الرُّسُلُ أُقِّتَتْ. SubhanAllah. This is a very massive idea, because if the prophets are held to trial and they are guided divinely by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what about the rest of us? In this passage, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes how Bani Israel said to, or the disciples said to Isa alayhi salam, that, O Isa, هَلْ يَسْتَطِيعُ رَبُّكَ أَن يُنَزِّلَ عَلَيْنَا مَائِدَةً مِنَ السَّمَاءِ. Isa, O Isa, can your Lord send some food for us? So Isa alayhi salam was taken aback by that. He said, قَالَ اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Have taqwa of Allah. You guys asked me food. And then they said, actually we want to eat from this, and we want that this becomes a way for us to be sure that this is the truth, and this is going to be like a day of celebration for us. So that was when Allah says, Allahumma rabbana anzil alayna ma'idatan min as-sama, quoting the dua of Isa alayhi salam. And that became what is known in the Christian tradition as the Last Supper. That was that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then goes on to ask him, display the scene from the Day of Judgment, asking Isa alayhi salam, did you say that you should take me as a God? أَنْتَ قُلْتَ لِلنَّاسِ اتَّخِذُونِي وَأُمِّيَ إِلَهَيْنِ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ. Did you say that, Isa? And of course he's going to say, قَالَ سُبْحَانَكَ. You are perfect, glory be to you. I will never have said that. إِن كُنْتُ قُلْتُهُ فَقَدْ عَلِمْتَ. If I had said that, you would have known. So it's a very beautiful, very moving scene from the Day of Judgment. Concludes very fittingly with Isa alayhi salam, began with speaking of the delegation of the Christians, and ended that with the testimony of Isa alayhi salam on the Day of Judgment. A very beautiful surah. We ask Allah to give us the tawfiq to understand.